Hi, my name is Gary Stewart, and I'm the founder and CEO of Founder Tribes, a mobile app that provides founders around the world with access to the feedback, networks, and capital that they need to start up and scale up their businesses, all from their mobile phones. We exist to empower entrepreneurs of all races, all genders, geographies, religions, sexual orientations, etc., because we understand that while opportunity is spread evenly, while talent is spread evenly, opportunity is not. And we are here to change that, which is why I'm so happy to be hosting this event of amazing CEOs during Women's History Month. The session will be moderated by our own Wendy Maldonado D'Amico. But before I pass it over to her, I'd like to give you a brief update of what we've accomplished since we first launched just over a month ago. Since launching in February, we already have almost 3,000 users on the app across 3 continents. But we kind of want more, so we'd love for you to try it out for yourself. All you need to do is to download the app on either app store, and then send us any feedback that you may have, because we can always be better. But to give you a sense as to what the app itself and what the experience is like, let's take an inside look into the Founder Tribes app.
We live in a world where more than 500 million entrepreneurs will never get access to the feedback, networks, and capital they may need to realize their dreams. Talent is distributed evenly, but opportunity isn't. Founder Tribes exist to change that. Our mobile app can be accessed by anyone, anywhere in the world. It all begins with a founder submitting a pitch that will be evaluated by a community of entrepreneurs and investors relevant to their vertical and stage. Through the app, each founder gets qualified feedback about which areas of their business might need improvement, in the form of how many people swiped right or left, and in the form of ratings on each key element of a business plan based on Sequoia Capital's evaluation system. Each founder is then offered a personalized selection of video tips from world-class founders who explain how they've overcome similar challenges. Our professors are truly world-class and include such names as Stacey Abrams, Steve Blank, Jen Wong, and Anne Wojcicki. If a founder wants more support, she can access our curated database of coaches and mentors and set up one-to-ones, all via the app. Each founder iterates her pitch until the community of entrepreneurs and investors say that she is investment worthy. We'll then introduce her to relevant funders appropriate to her stage and vertical, including venture capital, angels, and alternative finance. We already have paying customers, including Capital Enterprise. And our investors include American unicorn founders such as Sander Daniels, founder of Thumbtack, which has raised $436 million from Sequoia Capital and Google, Zach Bookman, founder of OpenGov, who has raised $140 million from investors including Andreessen Horowitz, executives like Jamie Broderick, who is the former head of wealth management at UBS UK and Jersey, and Dana Wagner, who is currently the chief legal officer at Impossible Foods, which has raised $1.4 billion from investors like Serena Williams, Katy Perry, and Jay-Z. We are leveling the playing field for entrepreneurial talent. So download the app, accelerate your business, and empower yourself.
And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Wendy, who will introduce our amazing panel.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Wendy Maldonado D'Amico. I am the Chief of Staff and Head of Marketing here at Founder Tribes, and it is my great pleasure to bring you this event for Women's History Month, which brings 5 amazing female founders to you to talk about their experiences of building their businesses and what they have learned from that so that they can share those lessons with all of you. So without further ado, I'm actually going to allow each of them them to introduce themselves. So first I'd like to bring up to the stage Kiamu. Kiamu.
Hi, Wendy. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Kiamu. I'm based in London. I run a beauty e-commerce business called Beautonomy and have recently raised funding to pivot our business so that we're going to be more focused on helping beauty content creators to monetize their content and get their fair share of, the huge $500 billion industry that is beauty. So I'm really excited to talk today with everyone about my own experiences of doing all of that. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'd like to bring up Jane Kagwa Snow. Jane, we can't hear you for some reason. Oh.
Sorry about that. Jane Kagwa Snow again. I am the CEO founder of Aquavita LLC. We're an East Africa-based business headquartered in Nairobi, operating in Dar es Salaam and Kampala. Aquavita is basically a child of the first search fund in Africa. I'll talk a little bit more about such funds, came out of the United States. Our business focuses on basically providing sustainable services in the workplace, schools, and so forth. Right now, we're focused on providing air purifiers and water purifiers in corporate offices, schools, hospitals, and that kind of thing. So I'm really thrilled to be here and to hear the other stories of the other entrepreneurs on this panel and share my experience building a business, fundraising from the United States and building a business in a different part of the world.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's bring up Jane Park.
Hi, I'm Jane Park, and thank you, Wendy and Gary, for having me. My company right now is Toki. It's my second entrepreneurial venture, and we're about making gifting more sustainable and meaningful. So we have technology in the form of reusable digital cards that help make gifts much more sort of help you travel with your gift in this era when we can't really show up with it. So in my past, I raised over $50 million from VCs like Andreessen Horowitz for my previous venture at Julep. And before that, I was a lawyer a long time ago. I am the child of immigrants. My parents and I immigrated from Korea when I was 4, so I didn't speak English, and they still think I speak English with an accent. So I am excited to be here and see such a great, diverse group of people.
Welcome, Jane. Next, let's bring up Karen.
Hey, Wendy, thank you so much for inviting me to join this panel, and thank Gary as well. I'm Karen Rios, co-founder and CEO of Lifesaver. We're a mission-driven fintech based here in New York. We're trying to accelerate participation into the traditional financial system by delivering inclusive technology to the over 10,000 community banks and credit unions in this country that most recently have helped save thousands of businesses across the US through PPP loans and other COVID-related acts. And really excited to be here with such an amazing group of female founders and hear everybody's experiences. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Simi.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Thank you so much, Gary. And I'm so pleased to be here with this fantastic panel. My name's Simi Lindgren, and I'm the founder and CEO of Beauty Bazaar, the AI-driven conscious beauty destination. And we're really on a mission to help conscious beauty shoppers find the right beauty products. So really strip back and take away the trial and error of finding beauty products. We've all faced it. And when I saw the stats, which were horrendous, that 70% of Black and Asian women felt that the high street didn't cater to them, I really wanted to create something. So I did. So thank you for having me.
Fantastic. All five of you are so inspiring. I feel so honored to be able to be here with you and to share you with our community. So let's jump into it. What my first question is for each of you, and I'll kind of call on you respectively. I would love to know. I would love for you to share the story of what inspired you to start your business. All of us sort of have this fire in the belly. We see a problem, we want to go out there and solve it. Really just interested in knowing what impelled you to start your venture. So let's start with Jane Kagwa-Snow.
Great. So what I did say was I was a former investment banker and did some private equity and focused on Africa. I should have also said I was born and raised in Kampala, but have not lived in Kampala in a while now. But so for me, my driver was I always had this commitment that, you know, after I've gone overseas and done all this training, that I would come back home and build a world-class business that employed Africans, expats, and really to demonstrate to the world that we do have the ability, to obviously enhance lives in Africa, but also demonstrate that we do have the professional skills and the talent and the people there to, lift, the continent. So, given my background, I was able to tap into a very unique quasi exclusive group of investors who were called, the search fund investors. And at the time, nobody had within that community had invested in Africa. So I went on an education exercise, educating them about the opportunities in Africa, but specifically East Africa. And somehow was able to convince them to invest in a small search fund, which later on ultimately we utilized to build Aquavita. And then, support us, along the way. I've been running the business now for 6 years. We've raised over $5 million within this small group of investors. So majority of them are based in the United States and Europe. But the driver here is really to demonstrate that, I could build, a startup, in Africa that's sustainably focused with a complete East Africa team. So that has been proven so far, and we're looking forward to more years of growth.
That's amazing. Thank you, Jane. Karen, why don't you take us through your journey?
Sure, absolutely. And not totally dissimilar from what Jane just mentioned. I guess in a nutshell, really Lifesaver came out of the combination of professional and lived experience. So a little on that, my professional background is in financial services. I worked at a long-short equity hedge fund here in New York. Primarily, it was brought on board to enact this piece of legislation called Dodd-Frank. And that really just gave me a front row seat at the intersection of public policy and financial access. Now, to just cue everybody in the audience, Dodd-Frank really didn't have an effect on my hedge fund, but that piece of legislation dead-ended Black and Brown America's ability to ever become a qualified purchaser or accredited investor and invest in the funds like the one I was working at. And I originally am from Miami, Florida, so I'm a first-generation American, like Jane Park. And I grew up sort of seeing the promise and the peril of the financial system, if you will. So my lived and professional experience tells me that essentially we live in two Americas, right? One where somebody can afford a chartered financial planner and have their hand held throughout the financial wellness of their life, and everyone else. So when I started to build Lifesaver, essentially all I wanted to do was do two things: build the best financial wellness tool for regular people that I could, and to build that experience around a smart product distribution engine that was designed to increase participation and products per household at community banks and credit unions. Because for me, what I realized was that there's 10,000 plus of these institutions that are essentially nodes in our economy here in the US, that if they were easier to transact with, you could drastically reduce regular people's exposure to predatory products. So for me, really, Lifesaver came out of, one, me trying to solve my own problem as a consumer, but the realization that there was just a massive need in this country for access to the traditional system.
Thank you so much, Karen. Let's go to Kiemu.
Thanks, Wendy. So Beautonomy is a beauty business. I'm a doctor by background, so it's really like everyone else, very in some ways a journey from where I started. I'm also I'm not a first generation immigrant, but I'm a second generation immigrant. My dad's Nigerian, and he ran a series of small businesses when I was a kid that always taught me always gave me an insight into disparities in access to capital, and the challenges of him being, I guess, a Black man in the UK trying to run businesses. He was very keen that me and my siblings went to medical school. That's also something I think is quite common in the immigrant community. So he's got three doctors and a dentist. And all of us thinking about, is this what we wanted to do? And so I was always interested in this concept of access to opportunity. And when I was at medical school and as a doctor, I used to, that was what I was really focusing my energy on. It was around how can I help people who are from, I guess, non-conventional backgrounds who do want to do medicine get into medicine. And then I had a couple of life shocks. My sister was diagnosed with non-curable breast cancer, and my son was born with cerebral palsy, which meant I needed to take some time off work and reassess, do I want to do this for the rest of my life, or do I want to kind of find out, how I can self-actualize. So I had the opportunity, my husband actually was running an incubator for a big beauty company, and Beautonomy was one of the value propositions that they were testing. And to kind of, I guess, shorten the story a bit, the thing that really excites me about Beautonomy is that in this new economy, people are going to be working in different ways. They're going to be earning revenue from different revenue streams. They're not going to be doing a job for life in the way that they used to. And beauty is a creative pursuit that generates a lot of value for the big companies, but the people that are creating that content, that are driving sales, are not getting a cut of that pie. And most of them are women. Most of them don't realize that they're marketers. So really, the idea of empowering them to access the value that they're creating resonated with me on that access point that's always been, I guess, a red thread that runs through my my journey so far. So I kind of fell into Beautonomy by accident, but I'm really thriving on that mission. So that's my story.
Love it. Sydney, why don't you tell us about your company and your journey?
Thank you, Wendy. I think quite similar to Karen is I really wanted to solve a problem. I wasn't really seeing myself in beauty, which is why Beauty Bazaar, U plus beauty, so UT. I decided to go on this journey. I'm of Nigerian heritage, so like Kiemu, I started off, it's an extremely strange journey, but I started off at medical school. So Nigerian parents want you to become a doctor so very much, like, you have to go to medical school. So, I went to medical school and realized that, my passions lay elsewhere. So I realized that quite early on. So I forged a career in Marcom's techs and had clients such as Estee Lauder and Chanel. And I was just looking like I was looking when I was a little girl at how I didn't really fit, like I didn't really see what products I could use. And when I was transitioning from having my hair chemically straightened for so many years to having natural hair, I couldn't really find anything that would allow me to do that successfully. And then it was when I was pregnant, finding products, body care, skincare that were toxin free. What am I meant to use? What nail polish am I meant to use? And the whole discovery and evaluation, validation piece was so fragmented. And speaking to so many people, I was just like, this is a problem that needs solving. So putting that all together and leveraging, my experience in beauty and tech and even science, I decided to launch Beauty Bazaar so like everyone could see themselves in beauty. irrespective of their race, their gender, their ability, what their preferences were, you know, if they liked cruelty-free or vegan, or if they were Muslim and wanted halal products, just so everyone could find a product that was right for them based on their genetic, lifestyle, environment, and preferences. And using artificial intelligence was really key, but then it was like another issue that I needed to solve, because there isn't much inclusive AI out there. So I had to teach myself Python, I had to teach myself Ruby, and I'm currently studying at Oxford Artificial Intelligence in Business, you know, to ensure that there was this kind of inclusive AI. So it wasn't just focusing on beauty, it was trying to democratize a whole other industry that was, had historically been quite homogeneous. So when I was thinking about the problem, I ended up trying to solve many problems at the same time, really just so I could help all the beauty shoppers out there forget that whole kind of crazy fragmented buying journey and really find the products that suited them. Because our mission is based on sustainability. So sustainability is kind of ensuring that I'm leaving the world in a better place for future generations. And that's social equity. So the brands that we curate from they're underrepresented founders, they're indie, and they span a breadth of categories. But then also that reducing waste piece, because you're finding the right products. You're not having the trial and error and wasting your money and making an investment that doesn't work. But also, you know, the impact that the beauty industry has on the environment, just reducing that altogether. So there's numerous problems that I was trying to solve, but overall they lead back to the same thing.
I love the ambition of all of you. Let's go to Jane. Jane, tell us about your journey. Are you there? Oh, there you are.
I love the whole that children's book. If you give a mouse a cookie, you know, if you're on the way to start an e-commerce company, you might need some AI to go with that, and on the way to make that more inclusive, you might need to teach yourself. So I feel like all entrepreneurism is sort of like that. My company Toki right now is around. The inspiration for that was looking around over the holidays and looking at all of the gift wrap that couldn't be recycled because it's too thin or adorned or too color saturated. So every year, Americans only use enough single-use gift wrap to go around the earth 120 times. And this seemed like Sorry, I don't know why my connection is is going out. Let's have our fingers crossed. So the inspiration for Toki was really about making reusable gift wrap fun and making reuse kind of engaging through a QR code card that kind of you can see how something's been regifted from person to person. But, you know, when I first left Starbucks to start my first company, Julep, I would say that I left because I had my dream job. I was running innovation at Starbucks, which is an amazing consumer company. And I, at that point, had 2 kids. And I said to my husband, I feel like my work life isn't engaging enough for me. And he was like, wait, so you love your kids so much that you want a job that's going to take you away from them more? But it wasn't, I don't think about it like time. I think about it like engagement. I wanted all of me engaged. And so I went to start Julep, and there's a lot of ins and outs and pivots throughout the way, and how I found myself to raising $50 million in venture capital is a whole other story. But the one thing I want to share about that is that I felt all that time that I was competing with the boys. I was competing with Dollar Shave Club and Shoe Dazzle, and some of these companies are around and some of them aren't. Zulily, what else were we compared to? There was like a fitness athletic clothing company that Kate Hudson works on now. Anyway, the point is I burned over $10 million in Facebook advertising that I wish I could have had back. It wasn't on technology. It wasn't on people. It was just on trying to run faster so I could keep up with the boys. And all that time, I was also thinking to myself, if I just sacrifice today, it's the startup thing, right? You sacrifice now for the goal later, for the big goal, for the big thing. And I, exited that company. It was an okay exit. It wasn't an IPO. But having started my second company, I would say that I really think about how do I use the goal of tomorrow to make today more exciting. Like if I didn't have a company now, I probably wouldn't have been invited here to meet all of you guys. Like, what is it about having that big goal that makes every day more engaging? It's the other way around. It's not sacrificing today for tomorrow. It's using tomorrow to make today more engaging. And then I look back and look at my results. Like, am I doing less? Am I being lazier? Am I achieving less? And I don't think so. I think I'm doing all the same things. I'm growing the company just as quickly. It's just that I am much less miserable than I was the first time around. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Jane. That's so interesting. I have so many questions for all of you, but one thing that actually, I'll just kind of jump off of something that Jane just said. I'm really curious to know if the five of you think that you approach entrepreneurship differently because you are female. Do you approach building a company and a team in a way that may be different from the boys, to paraphrase from Jane? Do we as women think about entrepreneurship in a way that is different?
Can I start with?
Yeah, go for it.
When I was raising money in Silicon Valley, I would wake up early, make lunches for my kids at like 4 a.m. I would catch a 6 a.m. flight, book all my meetings back to back on Sand Hill Row, and then fly home at the end of the day. The guys I met in the waiting rooms were like 25, and they wouldn't like even have brushed their hair. I remember I was talking to one of them and I was being candid and vulnerable. And I was like, hey, one of the hardest things for me is to actually, what are the words you use to land an investor, right? My first investor invested in me because he said, Jane, is this like NPR? If I write you a check, will you stop calling me? Because I kept calling him and just like talking and talking and talking. And I didn't have the words to close. Like, will you give me money? Do you want to invest? Sounded like too impersonal for me. Anyway, I was saying this story to this guy and being like, hey, what are the words that you use to ask people for an investment? And he goes, oh, that's easy. I just asked them, do you want to be on the right side of history? And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I landed on the words, do you want to participate? Because that to me felt like what was right. It was participating in a journey and I wanted to be on a team together. But just finding the words to close the investment deal was different. And I think that's a small encapsulation. I think there's 100 things like that a day where it's different based on your experience and how much you feel entitled to the dollars that are out there, and how, like I feel like so many men and women, honestly, like people in the Bay Area in particular are like outraged that they're not tech billionaires already, right? Like life is unfair because they're not a tech billionaire is a real thing. And I don't know what to do about that. But I definitely think that that's there's a gender, there's a cultural, there's a generational, there's so many kind of things that make the way that you approach a company different. Every company, it's like a fingerprint, right? It's very different based on who the founder is. And that's an incredible luxury and privilege to be able to shape the culture. You do so much more than you realize in terms of, like we have more impact on our employees than the government does. I mean, the government doesn't touch you like 8 to 12 hours a day. And as founders, we do. And I think everything that we do is based on our lived life experience.
Anyone else want to weigh in on whether women approach entrepreneurship differently or not?
I want to.
So let me go Kiamu, then Simi, then Karen.
Thank you so much, Jane, for the things that you've just said. They resonate with me so much. I think the 2 points around being a parent and then doing your fundraising and running your business on top of that is kind of a very unacknowledged element often for women in business, I think. During the pandemic especially, the caregiving responsibilities have so disproportionately fallen on women who are still working and still running businesses. I just think it shows how much grit we have, and I think it's unacknowledged often. And then my second comment is that women have to approach entrepreneurship differently because the world reacts to them as entrepreneurs differently. So we don't have a choice in a way, but to meet people where they are. And we might choose to do that in different ways. We might be we might be bored of it and bullish about it on some days and flippant, but the world is always asking us to prove ourselves a bit more, I feel. And we react to that in different ways.
Yeah, I agree with what Kiemu and Jane said. I think as a mother of 2 extremely young children and launching a business during the pandemic, I have a really supportive husband, so we share the caregiving responsibilities. But I think the way women approach business, they take into consideration so many more factors. They're conscious that we receive less funding in comparison to men to start businesses, even though we're such active participants in the economy. And then you have to balance that with, family, other duties, and all the rest of it. And I feel like when we do take that plunge, it's because we're really trying to change something. It's almost a mission. And I think that the way that, it might be a vast generalization, but the way that men and women create businesses and start businesses, their goals are very different. I think the goals for women are usually to change something in the industry and find a solution and be extremely mission driven. And I think those motivations kind of differ. And then in comparison, what we deem as success, Jane said she had a okay exit. I mean, I'm sure it was a brilliant exit, but what we deem as success is completely different, right? And I think at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is change something, and we're hoping to compete and show, our worth in this incredible way, whilst trying to balance everything else. So it's that. It's all of everything that Kiemu and Jane said.
Can I just say, by the way, Simi, as the words were coming out of my mouth, I was like, a boy would say that totally differently about the exit. I was like, it would be like bragging, because it's so hard to even get any exit. But I'm like, and I was like, if we IPO'd, I'd be like, well, the IPO wasn't that great. Or like, it's so true. It's impossible.
And I think to Simi's point, like all of this has to do with where women are relative to men, right? And I can only speak about the US here, but like American women leave almost $900 billion annually due to the wage gap. So when we start companies, we're starting from a different place. And when we're seen by investors and sort of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, we have to be seen in the void that is lack of women representation. So it inherently creates a different dynamic to Jane's earlier point about the right words and something as basic as your hair, right? A man can go in there unshaved, totally fine. He fits a stereotype. We, on the other hand, are, by doing that behavior, right, filling other stereotypes that work against us. So I think by and large, it's just a different experience. They're uncomparable. And, not to sort of just dwell on that, I think what's really interesting about women, again, given how we come from a different place socioeconomically relative to male founders, also have a different relationship with risk, which is not to say we're risk averse. I would say everybody here clearly has taken a ton of risks. And all of us, right, we're supposed to be doctors, lawyers, engineers, are now entrepreneurs. So for me, I think what's interesting is how women think about risk. It's inherently different from men. And I think it was Harvard Business School, right, has this really interesting report about any woman in the C-suite translates to sort of 30% better performance for a company. And I think it's because when women think of risk, it's still tied to a kind of survival, because I think opportunity for us is less than men, that male founders don't necessarily, I mean, don't want to generalize here, but it's just not as common. And I think it's also related to resources. You have to do more with less, and that forces you to live with, I think, a kind of fear that male founders don't necessarily have, and to be very as safe as you can with the risk that you take relative to your business and your team.
Yeah, I might just add a couple of things. I'm involved with the Women's Search Network, which is other women who've gone this path, mostly in the United States and Europe, as the concept continues to grow. And it's interesting because as I listen to some of the points of view shared here, that my experience was a little bit different in a way that I went at this at almost very naive, meaning that I thought, I believed I was good enough. Who doesn't appreciate that Africa is the last frontier? That's where all the growth is left. Everybody should just come on board. And so with a little bit of that, which is good and bad, I knew that I was going into a territory where going to Silicon Valley, literally, 80% of my investors are in Palo Alto, and saying, I'm going to bring you to Africa and I'm going to give you the best returns that this whole search fund community ever did. And oh, by the way, I couldn't find a business to buy. So I came back and said, I'm going to start one. Do you still want to come along? And 99% of my investors agreed to go the startup route versus my acquisition route. And the idea there is that I think sometimes I think it's okay for women to go out and get away from what the box looks like, because I literally just broke the box and just flattened it out, in the sense that I was supposed to do an acquisition. I ended up doing a startup, did it in Africa and so on and so forth. And I do think it goes to some of what Simi might have said, that, I led with my purpose. I was going to build this business in Africa. The mission was way bigger than any of the obstacles. And I think that's a very, again, feminine, the mission-based mindset, that, I wasn't really focused on how much capital I was going to raise. I literally was just counting investor by investor as they agreed. And when I got to that number, I was like, okay, great. And I should also say, every investor that called back or sent an email to confirm they were fully booked, it was like I literally was shaking as I was waiting for those emails and so forth. But I think what the driver of that mission, of that purpose, to see that, East Africa run business with East Africa professionals providing that employment opportunity, was so big and had lived in my mind for so long that helped me really just not even think about everything else that was surrounding me. And so I think that authenticity, versus, some of the things we're told, if you go to Silicon Valley, you should behave this way, do this, do that, do that. I think, teaching people that, sometimes you really have to go there and just show you, who you really are, what the opportunity is, and don't try to. In fact, one of my investors pretty much just said, first of all, I want to hear all about your adversity, ability to navigate adversity. He was the largest committer in terms of capital. And he also said, if you want to come here and sound and look like all the other Stanford, HBS, and MIT Sloan kids, like, I have nothing for you. But so in that process, not only he helped me, really go back to myself and say, why was I trying to do this? So I really encourage that, it's a little bit outside the box, because we want to sound the same. We want to say the same things and have the same language. But I think there's real opportunity in differentiating and really showing your uniqueness, because we're truly all unique, and our purposes are going to be different, and the world needs to hear them. And sometimes it's not what they're used to hearing, but I think that in itself sometimes is the opportunity and the differentiator.
Can I just tap on one little
Go
thing?
for it. Go for it.
That my first slide in all of my VC pitch decks had a little kind of a map of where I started off, and like the house I was born in Korea, and then like how my parents had a 7-Eleven store, and I got to put in other things like my degrees and Starbucks and like things that they logos that they would like. But that was the very first thing, because I was like, I don't want you to kind of go through this whole pitch deck and then decide at the end that I'm not a serious person. I want to get that out of the way. And also, we can't win against being like a white male. I can't win that race. I can only win at being me and really trying to shed a light on that. So it was like, I'm not going to hide that at the end. I'm not going to hide it, just not talking about it. I'm going to put it front and center. If you don't like me, then a fast no is better than a slow no. So what is a pain is slow no's, right? So if you're like, oh, I'm not into you, fine. But if you are going to lean in, then it's great to have that up front. So I totally appreciate that advice, Jane. And for people who are watching, if you're doing investor meetings, you have to be you, because that's how you're going to be most powerful.
Does anyone else want to comment on their experience with investors raising money? Any advice you'd like to share with other people, or just kind of what your experience has been to date? Because as we know, the percentage of women who are raising money from VC is just 2%. And then when you start slicing that down for women of color, 0.64% for Black and Latinx women, 0.002% for Black women total. I mean, it's ridiculous. These numbers are so tiny. I would love to hear from any of the other three of you about your experience with fundraising.
Yeah, happy to chime in on that. As I mentioned earlier, I think Jane brings up a really good point. Like, you can't compete with the guys, and you have to just kind of let that go. You can only be you. I think one thing that I find a bit troublesome and sort of just an interesting way of how gender dynamics play out for women entrepreneurs is this: people love my mission, and then that's great, but like, this mission is around a market and a market opportunity. And you can hold both of those things up in your mind at the same time. But I don't know if it's a function of my double X chromosomes or my levels of melanin, but for whatever reason, right, the market is something that I get questions on, where my male CTO without a background in finance gets compliments on. That's just a reality, I think, that female founders have to navigate, right? And I think, to Jane's point, I'm never going to turn into Kevin. My hair texture isn't going to change at this point in my life. So all I can do is lean into who I am, my own experience, and my market research. That does not necessarily make checks arrive faster, but it does help you get up, dust yourself up, and keep pitching every single day, which at the end of the day, I think this is one of the few things that levels the playing field between male and female founders is persistence, right? You got to keep doing it. And I think not trying to blot out the sun with a finger and knowing the lays of the land kind of give you that reality that you need and fills your cup, as it were, to continue to do this, which seems a little crazy from time to time.
I'm really curious to know what each of you, or what some of you might think about in terms of how anyone who is truly committed to women succeeding in the marketplace, to having successful ventures, what would you like to say to them? They've stepped up. They said, I am committed to investing in women, to making sure that women are successful. I have daughters, sisters, wives, mothers, grandmothers, aunts. What would you say to these people who, what do we need to change with the system? What needs to change within the ways that people invest in women to make a more level playing field?
I think that investors need to be more imaginative in the criteria and the indicators that they use to assess things like grit, resilience, competence, because I think that because most investors are white male Kevin types, I think that it's easy for them to get reassurance when they meet people like them, obviously. So they just need to be more imaginative and take the time to understand what it means to have been, for example, a first generation immigrant who didn't speak English, you know, and, you know, all the life experiences that people go through to get where they are then presenting to VCs in business, and so and not expect more from women. So all of the women here have done other things to a high professional level, you know, lawyers, investment bankers. There are so many other entrepreneurs who just have so many who don't have all that background. So why do they need so much reassurance in order to invest in women? And I would say particularly women of color. Why do they need all that reassurance? Why can't they be more open to using kind of other criteria, I suppose, is a question or a suggestion.
The other thing I would add to that, once told
Jane? She's back.
Okay, sorry about that. So a VC once said to me, "Hey, I really love you. You know, you as a leader. I love your concept, but I only do one deal a year," which is like the thing that people don't realize about VCs is that, you know, they have hundreds and hundreds of meetings and they do maybe one deal a year. And he was like, "If I'm going to do a deal, I really want to do something on something I'm interested in, and I'm not really interested in beauty because that's not a product." And it was like, wow. I think that's like being imaginative about looking beyond the scope of the products that they use. And then the second thing is every woman and, you know, like person of color startup I've ever met has had more challenges at the beginning. And so I would say like, ask why several layers in, and be open to the fact that, you know, when I first got VC funding, my cap table was a mess because I was a woman and it was hard to raise money. And I had this crazy investor who asked me to give back all of my shares of my company and earn it back. I didn't know that that wasn't a thing that people did. I'm a lawyer. I graduated from Yale Law School, and I still signed this ridiculous term sheet that no other men would have been asked to do. And so the VCs, if they were like, oh, I don't want, like a lot of them said, I don't want to touch this deal. It's too messy. Like, you know, we have to go in and like recap everything. And I want to do that. It's going to piss people off and whatever. And so I feel like a lot of deals with women and with people of color come with like hair on the deal, where it's not a perfect line. It's not perfect. And I think that's one thing that I always say, it's actionable, right? It's an actionable thing you can do. Ask why several times. Don't just assume the person is incompetent and that's why they ended up with this ridiculous cap structure. Like, just think about what the systemic situation might have been. And I think a lot of these deals, people have to work just like a little bit harder. It's not, you know, impossible, but I think that's what we can ask VCs for. It's like, and if you are one of these people with hair on your deal, just know that you're not alone. I think it's happens to all of us that we accept investors here and there, and all of a sudden you're in this place that is not necessarily how you would have built it from scratch if you could.
I agree. I think to take from what Jane and Kiemu said, it's that diversity of thought. Like, I think, not just being creative, but actually just not just looking for diversity, because we know diversity breeds innovation. Being diverse, like having diverse thinking, right? Why aren't there many women entrepreneurs? Why do they get less funding? Is it because, the funds aren't available for them, or they can't take the risk leaving their day job behind to actually pursue this journey? Maybe they don't have the connections, but this person is willing to take it. They're usually highly educated. I think we've all demonstrated that. They usually have incredible grit and resilience and determination. So I think applying some diversity of thought always, and surrounding yourself with different people and listening, as opposed to kind of looking for logos or looking for that reassurance, just thinking, I'm not just going to look for diverse founders. I'm going to think diversely and think about, that investment, that could be a really innovative investment that gives you incredible return on investment later on, incredible gains.
Wendy, if I could add maybe a slightly different opinion here, because I agree with both Kiemu and Simi, who are like, it's diversity of thought. We need more diverse VCs. That to me also translates to like, we got to wait a generation, which to me is not a viable option, right? So honestly, and this is me kind of putting on my capital markets, financial services hat back on, I think the way you truly solve this problem is a new funding structure that fundamentally changes the LPGP structure. Because new emerging managers who do have that diversity of thought, who do have the funding mandates, cannot deploy where they want to, because they are subject, just like many women founders, to the same funding dynamics. They got to go out and raise in 18 months, and they got to put in good bets. So if we really want to be serious about how this changes, it's new funding products and new investor relationship dynamics. I've given this clearly a little bit of thought, but I think honestly, that's how the problem is solved, right? It's not waiting for a new generation of people to come online in 25 years. What happens to all the women behind us in the meantime?
Okay, we are running out of time. I could talk to all of you all afternoon. This is such an amazing conversation. So we're going to do a very quick round robin. What piece of advice would you give to an entrepreneur who is out there, another woman entrepreneur, woman identified entrepreneur? You're in the trenches right now, but all of you are out there doing it. What piece of advice would you give to them? Make it succinct, and then we've got to wrap up here. Kiemu.
I think be brave and honest about what it is you want to do, even if it seems far away from where you are now.
Jane Kagwa.
I think what I would say is that, don't try to lock yourself into a box and set yourself up with these unreasonable expectations. I found that entrepreneurship, there's a lot of learning. So you need to be honest with yourself and know that you will fail, but expect that you will fail. But just keep in mind that entrepreneurship is mostly learning. But if unless you've done it before, but most people haven't. So keep that in mind, to keep your mind open, to learn, and to, give yourself opportunities to reach out to others to help you learn.
Jane Park.
I think the biggest piece of advice I would give to build on that is keep a failure journal. So we all say like, oh, failures become lessons, but it doesn't just happen by itself magically. The way it happens is that you look at it, you absorb it, you promise yourself you're going to do something differently the next time. When I worked at Starbucks, I don't think I ever made a single mistake because I never made a single decision. I just sort of like carried this decision ball from room to room to ask for people's blessings and get cross-functional, input. And decisions work so slowly in bigger companies, but on your own, you're failing all the time. It might be little decisions like, where should I put this light switch in my new building? Like, I didn't know, and I could have done a better job at that. But it could be bigger things like, people you hire or where you spend your budget. But I think expecting a ton of failure and writing it down, keeping a journal of it. I kept a log of how many people Howard Schultz had approached for investment, and he had like 200 no's to every one yes. And so every time I got a no, I was like, okay, this is supposed to happen, and I'm still getting fewer no's than Howard Schultz, and that must be good.
Excellent. Okay, Karen.
Yeah, I guess I would say to women who are listening, like, feel the fear and build it anyway. And just remember that VC is one of many paths to funding, right? That's not the only one. You can be a sustainable business. You can get a small business loan from the SBA here in the US. And, ask for help. I think a lot of women founders are hesitant to do that for ideas of weakness, but, build your tribe, build your community, and you'd be surprised how many people come to support you.
Awesome. Last but not least, Simi.
Thank you, everyone. You said everything I wanted to say. I think, my business is about personalization. So I think personalization, like, brand yourself. I think get yourself out there. We talked about authenticity earlier on. So ensure that you're out there. Personalize your network up, down, left, right. Personalize emails to every single one of your customers. I mean, every single one of your customers should receive an email from you. And yeah, I think that's it. I think, personalization and branding.
Love it. So first, I want to thank our amazing panelists today, Kiamu, Simi, Karen, Jane, and Jane, for joining us with Founder Tribes here this afternoon. Few things I wanted to just put on everybody's radar. Our next event is our inaugural pitch off. We're calling it Tribal Pitches. That will occur on March 30th at 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT. 5 members of the Founder Tribes community will pitch live to investors from, let's see here, an amazing lineup. SoftBank, Google, Sequoia, Velocity, Ascension Ventures, and I'm missing one here. But anyway, don't miss it. It's going to be an amazing event. Right now, we're evaluating all the pitches that came in on our app, and 5 of those people will be selected to pitch live during that event for potential investors investment. And that actually will be the first of a monthly series that we're going to run the 3rd week of every month. So just keep an eye out for tribal pitches. And if you are out there watching us now, please submit your pitch to our app. Keep an eye out for the instructions on the next tribal pitches event, which will happen in April and every month after that. But we would, and as I said before, as Gary mentioned earlier, please, if you haven't done so already, please download the app and let us know your feedback on it. Secondly, on March 31st, we will have another panel talking about investing in women specifically. These will be all female investors who have different types of funds to invest in women. And that will be a really targeted conversation about what we just finished talking about. How can we change things so that women are getting the capital that they need and deserve to grow their businesses and be successful? So once again, same bat time, same bat channel. We'll be live streaming 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT, and then we'll adjourn to Clubhouse for more conversation. So from here, I want to thank all of you for an incredibly illuminating conversation. And for those of you who can join us on Clubhouse, the link is available. You can see it streaming below. And you can also find that link online via our Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook accounts. So without further ado, we're going to hop over to Clubhouse and we will see you then. And thank you so much to our audience for joining us today. And thank you so much, most importantly, to our incredible female founders, panelists, and CEOs. So inspiring. Happy Women's History Month, everybody. Thank you. Bye.